All right, let's just jump right in. We usually think of AI as a tool, right? Something that crunches data or helps us automate boring tasks. But what happens when that tool gets a promotion? When AI stops just advising the board and actually joins it? We're going to explore a massive shift in how companies are run. One where AI isn't just a helper anymore, but is actually sitting at the table making the big calls.
And I want to be super clear. This is not science fiction. This isn't some far-off, maybe one-day scenario. It is happening right now. Believe it or not, since 2014, companies around the world have been officially appointing AI systems to high-level management positions. The game has already changed. AI is in some of the world's boardrooms making executive decisions.
I mean, just take a look at these examples. In Poland, you've got Mika, a literal humanoid robot CEO. Over in Hong Kong, two AI systems named Vital and Spock are on the board of a venture capital firm. Alicia T is a top manager in Sweden, and Aiden Insight acts as an observer on the board of a huge holding company in Abu Dhabi. These aren't just clever PR stunts. They're active, decision-influencing members of corporate leadership.
Okay, so putting an AI in charge immediately brings up a huge, fundamental problem, and it's all about translation. How on earth do you take the rules that we humans understand and make them work for a machine?
You see, at the very heart of this is a major conflict. Our decisions, our rules, they're social constructs. They're built on nuance, on context, and on the messy, ambiguous way we talk. We get the spirit of the law. But in AI, its decisions are technical constructs. It needs formal language, pure binary logic, and incredibly precise instructions. There's just no room for gray areas.
So this all boils down to one heck of a question. How do you actually program a concept like fairness? How do you tell an algorithm to act with transparency? These aren't just words to us, they are incredibly complex social ideas. And trying to turn them into code? Well, that's a massive translation challenge.
And what's wild is that while this feels like a brand new problem for the 21st century, the dream of solving it is surprisingly old. This is an idea that was maybe just a little ahead of its time.
For centuries, some of the most brilliant minds have dreamed of turning law into a kind of math problem. You go all the way back to the 1600s, and the mathematician Gottfried Leibniz was imagining a universal mathematical language that could solve literally any argument. Then, a couple hundred years later, Pierre-Simon Laplace saw probability theory as a way to reduce common sense to pure calculation. They had the vision, but they didn't have the tech. Today, we do.
And this quote from Leibniz just captures his vision perfectly. He imagined a world where any disagreement, whether you're an accountant or a philosopher, could be settled not by yelling at each other, but just by doing the math. Let us calculate. It's a pretty radical idea that has suddenly become incredibly relevant.
So, if the main problem is translation, what's the solution? Well, the authors of the paper we're looking at here propose something pretty clever, building a kind of dictionary for AI.
They call this solution algorithmic law. Now, the easiest way to wrap your head around it is to think of it as a special dictionary. Its entire purpose is to translate the abstract ideas we use in business and law, words like market price or fairness, into specific, concrete mathematical formulas that an AI can actually understand and use.
And here's a perfect example of how that would work. You start with a vague concept, market price. For a human, the rule is simple enough. The price should be in the standard market range. But for an AI, that's useless. It's way too vague. So the algorithmic definition gets super specific. Calculate the interquartile range, which is a statistical tool, of recent transactions. And just like that, a fuzzy idea becomes a hard, computable instruction.
Now, this approach seems pretty logical, right? But it opens up a much bigger, much deeper challenge. Because now we're not just coding instructions anymore. We are actually coding our values.
Let's just think about this for a second. If we asked an AI to come up with a list of names for a new CEO, what do you think it would give us? It sounds like a simple request, but the answer reveals a huge problem that's baked right into these systems.
Well, this is exactly what happened when a real language model, Gemma 2, was asked to do that. It came up with 20 names, and a whopping 85% of them were male names. Now, the AI isn't being malicious. It's just a mirror. It's simply reflecting the historical biases that are already present in the mountains of data we fed it. Without specific instructions to do otherwise, it just repeats our own stereotypes back to us.
And this is where it gets really, really complex, because when we try to define a word like fairness, we're not talking about just one thing. Researchers have more than 20 distinct mathematical definitions for it. For example, do you want fairness to mean that all groups get equal outcomes? That's called statistical parity. Or do you want it to mean that the AI's predictions are equally accurate for everyone? That's equal opportunity. Every single one of these is a different technical choice that leads to completely different real-world consequences.
So this makes one thing absolutely crystal clear. Picking which algorithm to use isn't some neutral technical decision for engineers to make. It is a deeply ethical one. The moment we choose a mathematical formula for fairness, we are embedding a very specific set of values directly into the code that's going to be making decisions. And that ethical choice forces us to zoom all the way out, because what this really means is that we have to fundamentally rethink our social contract.
You know, human law is built on the idea of 100% guarantees. We have a right to life, a right to dignity. These things are supposed to be absolute. But AI systems, they're built on statistics and probability. They don't do certainty. They offer outcomes with a high degree of probability. This shift from absolute rights to probabilistic ones requires a massive change in how we think about society.
And here's the reality check. This isn't some theoretical future problem. This translation of our values into code is happening right now. As one author puts it, these critical ethical decisions are being made inside a black box by engineers, often without any public debate or legal oversight whatsoever.
And that's exactly why this has to change. The process of creating this dictionary for AI, of deciding what our values mean in code, can't happen in secret. It has to be dragged out of the black box and into the public square. It needs to be transparent, it needs to be debated, because every single one of us has a stake in how our values get encoded.
Which leaves us with this one final, massive question. This isn't really about technology in the end. It's about power, it's about governance, and it's about the future of law itself. If our collective values have to be written into the code that will govern our businesses and our lives, who exactly gets to be the programmer?